I can't speak for other countries, but in America, when high school history classes ever talked about Africa in the 14th and 15th century, it was to talk about the Atlantic slave trade. But not so shockingly, that's not all that Africa is or was. The continent had multiple complex cultures and societies that went unnoticed in the American education system. One of these places being the Kingdom of Ndongo, which is in modern-day Angola, which is where the subject of this episode was born. Njinga of Ndongo and Matamba was the first female ruler of Ndongo and managed to keep her kingdom from being completely conquered by Portuguese rule. Hi, I'm Nyx, and welcome to the Pride series, where I talk about influential queer people. Before I start, I want to give a quick list of trigger warnings. There will be mentions of child murder, forced sterilization, suicide, colonialism, slavery, and war in this episode. If any of these topics are upsetting to you, I would recommend not watching this video.
Something I forgot to add is that when finding images for this video, I looked up stuff specifically for Angola. But there were multiple kingdoms in the area that is now Angola, so I may have added images that weren't specifically of Ndongo without realizing it. I tried to pinpoint the areas of the images, but sometimes the answers I got were a little vague. I tried to be consistent as possible, but there's a chance I made a mistake.
Before I start, I just want to let you know that Njinga has multiple variations of her name. She would go by Njinga, Anna de Sousa, Njinga, and there are a few other variations she used. Most of the sources I saw referred to her as Nzinga and Njinga, so I may at times call her Nzinga and other times call her Njinga, but just know that it is the same person. Njinga Mabande was born in 1583. It is said that Njinga was born in the breech position, which is basically when a baby is birthed feet first instead of the typical head first. Her position caused her umbilical cord to be wrapped around her neck. Miraculously, both her and her mother survived this experience. In Ndongo culture, it was believed that babies who had complicated or difficult births were destined for greatness, and boy was this true for Njinga. When she was born, her grandfather was the Angola, which means king or ruler in the Kimbundu language, which was the language group that Njinga spoke. When talking about leaders of Ndongo, I will be using Angola as a title for them, so just keep that in mind. One thing I want to just point out is that Angola, which is spelled Ngola, which is the title for a monarch, is different from the African country Angola, Angola, which is around where the story takes place, is modern day Angola, but these are two different words, so I just wanted to point that out. Her father Mabande was next in line to the throne when her grandfather would die. Her mother, Kangela, was one of her father's concubines, which was common for men in the Ndongo court to have. Kangela had 3 other children with Njinga's father, Mabandi, who was named after his father, Kambu, and Fungi. Njinga was the second oldest out of these 4 kids. When Nzinga was 10, her grandfather died and Mabandi became Angola. Nzinga was his favorite child. He claimed it was because she wasn't a threat to the Ndongo throne. The way succession worked in Ndongo was when Angola died, a new one would be elected from a group of eligible people, who were typically male sons of the Angola, but other nobles were eligible as well. This resulted in siblings commonly turning on each other and killing one another, so there would be no competition. Infanticide was also common as well, so the Angola would avoid being too close to his children, because if Ndongo nobles started to see he favored one over the other, they would kill the kid because this kid would have a higher chance of being chosen for the throne. But since Njinga was female, she wouldn't inherit the throne and therefore wasn't a threat. He had her trained in military combat, and she was said to be more athletic than her other siblings. She favored the battle axe, which was also the royal weapon. She, in addition, participated in many government duties with her dad, which taught her what the job of the Angola was, valuable skills like diplomacy. She was also taught by missionaries in the area how to read and write in Portuguese. Her father became Angola at a very precarious and unstable time. Now, the Portuguese first arrived in Ndongo in 1575, and for reference, Queen Elizabeth I of England was born in 1533, and Christopher Columbus headed into America in 1492. So there's like a general idea of the stuff going on, and they established a trading post in Luanda, which is now the capital of the country of Angola. There they would kidnap people from Ndongo and neighboring countries and send them to their colony in Brazil as slaves. So, Portugal and Ndongo were in decades of war against each other. Along with that, the Kingdom of Congo was allied with the Portuguese and was also fighting against Ndongo. A lot of Ndongan territory was taken during this period of war. Many of the people seized during these battles were sent off to Brazil. So, this is what Mabandi was walking into when he inherited his throne. He tried multiple methods to ease these conflicts, diplomacy, warfare, but nothing really stuck. When Njinga was in her late teens and early 20s, she led campaigns against the Portuguese. And when I mean led, I mean like she was in battle with her fellow soldiers fighting. She was also a great speaker, and while doing these campaigns, convinced a lot of people who were allied with the Portuguese to switch to her side. She also persuaded people enslaved by the Portuguese to escape and join her ranks. So, at a young age, she was doing some big accomplishments and was gaining respect from the people of Ndongo. Njinga also had her own band of concubines, who were both male and female. Although it was common for male nobles to have concubines, it wasn't for women to. Njinga didn't care though. She was royalty, and she wasn't going to let these conventions pull her down. At some point, she had a son with one of her concubines as well. When she was 35, her father died. Her older brother, Mabandi, didn't want there to be any issue with him ascending to the throne, so he killed many of his family members. Because they didn't have any right to become Angola, he spared his three sisters, Njinga, Kambu, and Fungi. What he did do, though, was forcibly sterilize them all so they couldn't have any sons to threaten his role. Although he spared Njinga, he did murder her baby son. Njinga would never forget this, and would eventually get back at her brother for the suffering he caused her and her sisters. After this traumatic experience, Njinga understandably took a step back and went to the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. There she also led campaigns against the Portuguese. Njinga got back in the game when Mabandi wanted to strike up negotiations with Portugal, but he didn't speak Portuguese and he wasn't good at negotiating. But he did know someone who was good at both. He approached his sister, the same one that he sterilized and murdered her son, and asked if she would do this for him. Njinga saw this as an opportunity and said she would do it on 3 conditions. First, she wanted full authority to negotiate in her brother's name. So basically, when she was there, she had the authority to make decisions that would be seen as legitimate. Second, if it helped with negotiations, she would be baptized Christian. And third, she would have a massive entourage to accompany her. Her brother agreed to all of these. So, she headed to Luanda, where the Portuguese were stationed. Traditionally, most Angolas would wear Western clothing when meeting with the Portuguese, but Njinga didn't do this. She wore beautiful, lavish, traditional Ndongo clothing and was decked out in feathers and jewels. She did this to be like, I'm not gonna conform to you, I'm a noble, goddammit, my culture isn't inferior to yours. Her entourage was said to be huge and extravagant. As she walked through Luanda, people were awestruck by her to the point that anyone in the area that had the ability to write wrote about this account. Njinga met with the governor at the time, João de Sousa. De Sousa argued that Ndongo needed to pay tribute to the Portuguese via handing over people to be enslaved. Typically at this time, a kingdom that was conquered had to pay a tribute, and Njinga argued that since Ndongo wasn't conquered land, they didn't need to. Instead, she offered that she would be publicly baptized, and that the two nations could open up peaceful trade with each other. She also negotiated peace with the kingdom of Matamba, the place that she stayed at after Mabandi murdered her son. So, for 6 months, she studied the Bible and then was baptized. She took the baptismal name Ana de Sousa from her godparents. She got Anna from a woman named Ana de Silva, who supported her while she was learning about the Bible. And she got de Sousa from the governor João de Sousa. When writing correspondence to Portugal, she would often sign off as Ana de Sousa. This negotiation made her brother look like a useless ruler and made Njinga look like she was more competent to be Angola. Now, along with Congo, Portuguese was allied with a group of nomadic mercenaries called the Imbangala, who were feared throughout the region. Because they were mercenaries who didn't have any solid ties with any of the nations they allied with, they decided to turn against Ndongo, despite the fact that both Ndongo and the Imbangala were allied with the Portuguese at this point. The Ndongan nobles were driven out of court, which included Njinga and Mbandi. The Imbangala then made the kingdom of Kisanji. Njinga asked for the help of Portugal to take back the kingdom, but they refused unless Mbande got baptized. Njinga was cunning, and although she was baptized, she told her brother he shouldn't be because it would be embarrassing for him to subjugate himself to a foreign country. He listened to her and didn't get baptized. Njinga most likely told him this to undermine his power as Angola. During this period of time, Mbandi fell into a deep depression and heavily relied on Njinga to do the duties of the Angola. Their father also fell into a depression like this, so it's likely that this runs in the family. Then, Mbandi died under mysterious circumstances. He most likely ingested poison, but it's unclear if someone poisoned him or if he committed suicide. Njinga arranged a proper funeral for her brother and then took power and became Angola. Her extended family was upset that she took power and tried to argue that since they're men, they have more of a right. She shot back that her father and grandfather were Angolas, so she had way more of a direct lineage to the throne than anyone else. In late 1624, a new Portuguese governor started to force Ndongan nobles to become Portuguese and become vassals to them. Although she was Angola, they also demanded that Njinga become a vassal as well. If you don't know, the definition of a vassal is, quote, a person who held land from a feudal lord and received protections in return for homage and allegiance. So she would be subordinate to the Portuguese. She refused and sent messengers to encourage people, especially slaves, to turn their backs from the Portuguese and join her. And this worked. Some nobles disagreed with her refusal and started to revolt against her. One of these revolts she failed to completely crush. She tried to negotiate with the Portuguese, but they instead supported her enemies. She and her army fled to a group of islands as refuge. Njinga then used some of the remains of her brother to talk to his spirit. This was a common practice, and she always had these remains wherever she went, just in case she needed to consult with her brother. Her brother's spirit possessed an Imbandu priest and told her that she must refuse to be a vassal at any cost. So, that's what she did. After a series of battles, she was defeated, but she escaped the island she was hiding out in. She then regrouped and got more support, and for a span of 3 years, continued to harass the Portuguese. During this whole time, Ndongo was ruled by a puppet ruler chosen by Portugal. The previous one that had been reigning died, and then they picked a nobleman named Angola Hari. He was a very unpopular leader, and the common people heavily supported Njinga, but powerful nobles supported Angola Hari. Njinga then visited the Portuguese to once again negotiate peace. She stated that she'd agree to become a vassal if they supported her rule as Angola. They rejected her offer, and she was expelled from Ndongo. During this banishment, she stayed hidden from the Portuguese, who wanted her dead, and did so pretty well for a while. This luck ran out though, and an encampment she was in was attacked. She escaped, but her 2 sisters, Kambu and Fungi, were captured. She vowed to save her sisters. She thought the best way to do this was to be in cahoots with the powerful mercenaries, the Imbangala, who I talked about earlier. She begged the leader of the Imbangala, Kasanje, to protect her. He agreed to if she married him and lived by Imbangalan traditions. Determined to save her sisters, she agreed to the terms. So, she started to train to be an Imbangala warrior. One notable thing she did was do a special ritual that basically degendered herself. She stated that she was no longer a woman, but a warrior. Now, it's hard to say if Njinga was actually genderqueer or not. This ritual was commonly done by people who wanted to become Mbangala leaders, but there was only one other woman who did this ritual before Nzinga, and this woman did the same thing, considering herself not a woman but a warrior. Njinga would also wear masculine clothing and refer to herself with masculine titles at times as well, but it's unclear if she did this ritual and presented masculine so she would gain more respect by disconnecting herself from the fact she was female, or if there was an aspect of her being genderqueer. It's also important to keep in mind gender was perceived differently in this culture than how Westerners perceive gender. For example, after this ritual, Njinga did become the leader of a group of Mbangalans, and this wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of. In addition, priests in Ndongo and other areas nearby who were assigned male at birth would dress in feminine clothing and refer to themselves as women, so gender wasn't as strict as it was in places like Portugal at this time. Is there a chance she wasn't cisgender? Yes, but we can't be 100% sure. But yeah, as I said, she became the leader of a band of Mbangalan warriors. She combined her Ndongan traditions with Mbangalan traditions to create a strong military. One of her most well-known conquests was when her and her soldiers captured the kingdom of Matamba. She was already well known in Matamba during the time she lived there, and many Matamban people respected her and even joined her ranks as she marched towards the capital. She easily captured the queen of Matamba and her daughter. Njinga killed the Matamba queen, Mungo, but spared her daughter, who stayed alongside Njinga for the rest of her life. As the ruler of Matamba, she ran many successful campaigns against the Portuguese. Around this time, Dutch merchants started to arrive in the area, and Nzinga managed to create a coalition with the Dutch and Congo to fight against the Portuguese. With the army of these three nations, they managed to defeat the Portuguese. In the late 1630s, her sister Kambu was released. Sadly, her other sister, Fungi, was still held captive. This peace didn't last though, and 2 years later, the Portuguese attacked again. Njinga had to flee, and Kambu was captured again. Along with her capture, the Portuguese found the letters Fungi had been sending to Nzinga that leaked important intel about the Portuguese. Fungi was killed for this. Nzinga didn't stop fighting though, and in 1647, she defeated the Portuguese at the Battle of Combi. She managed to regain much of the Ndongan land that the Portuguese had stolen. In 1656, a peace treaty was signed with the Portuguese. Part of the terms of the treaty was the release of Kambu, and it is said that when the two sisters reunited, they had a heartfelt embrace with each other. During this time, Njinga got baptized again, and actually started to follow Christian doctrine. She tried to get her subjects to also adopt Christianity, but most resisted this. So she started to burn down places that were important to Mabandu religion and replace them with churches. Around the age of 80, Nzinga died. A traditional Ndongo funeral and a Christian funeral was held for her. Before her death, she had named her sister Kambu as the next Angola. Because of Nzinga, Ndongo would have a lot of female monarchs throughout history. And that is the end of Njinga's story. I hope you learned a thing or two in this video. I know I definitely did while researching, and I will see you in the next video.